My name's Kito. This session is called Future-Proof Your Web Apps with Web Components and Lit. And it's kind of cool because this sort of dovetails a little bit with the prior talk about recognizing that the web platform, the browser, has a lot of great features we can use. So, all right, so I normally do this talk around 45 minutes or an hour, so I'm going to cram a lot of stuff into like 25 minutes or so. I'm not going to say much about myself. There's me. I don't know why this is happening today, this flickering. I disappear sometimes. It's really magical. You can find out more about me at kitomann.com, and this is all the stuff I would say if I had more time. But I do consulting and training, and I do front-end and back-end Java stuff, which is why I'm a Java champion. All right. And also, if you like podcasts, check out Stacked Podcast. It's a front-end and back-end podcast with me and a couple other guys. And we also interview people. We only do it every month or two, but it's fun listen if you like podcasts. If you speak at conferences a lot, I'm working on a site called speakertracks.com. You can check out as well. All right, so quick question for the audience. How many of you have heard about web components? Not components inside of like React, but actually web components. All right, so that's a decent number, good. All right. Okay, that's my main question. Good to know. All right, so I'll talk a little bit about web components in general. Basically, they are a way to write custom elements, actually write elements that actually look like HTML, okay? And I like this motto, which I think is similar to what Killian was saying earlier, right? What's in the browser stays in the browser, right? So all these standards that are in the browser, they're not going away. And as someone who's worked with multiple web frameworks, they seem to change all the time. Angular is probably the worst offender. So what I like about web components is that you write them, they work, they run. Okay, and it's basically a collection of specifications. It's not one thing. So the way the web platform works is there's lots of different specifications. You can group them together and call it one thing. So there's a few that we call web components. Then there's a lot of ancillary specifications that augment or enhance the way they work. So the number one spec is this thing called custom elements. Okay. And custom elements gives you the ability to create an element that looks just like any other HTML element, whether it's an input or select or div or whatever. Okay, and you can write it in JavaScript. You have to write JavaScript for this part. But once you've written it, it acts like all the other elements on the page. Okay, and this is conceptually similar to like what you get out of most of the web frameworks. You create like a component, right? And in some cases, you can see that component in the DOM. Some cases, you can't, depending on the web framework, right? But with custom elements, you actually write it, and it's actually part of the DOM. It's not a virtual DOM. It's not some special fake DOM. It's actually the real DOM. Okay. Another feature is called HTML templates or template element. How many people have worked with Vue before? Okay, so a few of you. So there's that little template thing in Vue. Like that's actually a real thing in real HTML. I have no idea if Vue uses the real element underneath all that, but there actually is the ability to create a template, which is basically an inert piece of HTML that you can then reuse in different places. Okay. Shadow DOM is another feature, and this provides DOM encapsulation. So if you write a custom element, and you don't want all the CSS on the page to bleed into your custom element, you can actually get some encapsulation inside of the DOM. And you can also make your DOM private if you don't want people to look at it. So those are sort of the three main specifications which are part of the web components trio, I guess you could say. There are a whole bunch of other ones that sort of augment things. So there's declarative shadow DOM, which lets you, so initially, shadow DOM, you had to write it in JavaScript, right? You had to programmatically say, for my element, here are some other elements inside of it I want to have. Like, so let's say I decided to make a dialog component for some reason, even though I shouldn't. And then inside of it, I have like a div, and then inside the div, I have a span, and some text, right? The inner part would be the shadow DOM, right? And you would have to write that programmatically. Now you can do it declaratively. CSS shadow parts gives you the ability to style part of a shadow DOM. Constructible style sheets gives you the ability to create a style sheet programmatically. All these things sort of make the experience of writing web components better and the developer experience better. Another one is form-associated custom elements. So initially, when web components came out, they're great, but like the input control stuff is kind of wonky. It didn't really integrate fully with the way that the browser handled forms, and there are a lot of accessibility issues. So those have been handled much better with form-associated custom elements. HTML modules is something that's sort of in the works, and that's the idea that you can grab another piece of HTML and treat it very similar to an ES module, okay? And that was a feature that was in earlier versions of web components. There was something called HTML imports. And scope custom element registries is another thing. So when you write a web component or write a custom element, it's basically registered on this global registry for the given page, right? So let's say you have one called, Kito form, right? And then you install another web set of components that has a Kito form, they would conflict, right? So custom registries gives you the ability to sort of namespace different component libraries. So these are all actually standards. The latter ones are newer, the last two aren't really finalized yet, but the other ones are baked in. So. Then people always say, what about browser support? Yeah, well, all this stuff, except for the last couple ones, it's supported in all the major browsers. There used to be polyfills for things like IE and stuff, but that's not the case anymore. Framework support is stellar. If you ever want to learn more about that, you can go to this site, which I will go to here. Oh, right. All right, so I won't go there. There's a site called, you can't read that here, but it's customelementseverywhere.com, okay? And it has some test suites that run on every major framework with web components to see how well they work. And all of them work wonderfully. React, of course, is the one that has the most issues because it does the most fancy virtual DOM stuff. But support's gotten much better, especially in the later versions of React. And there's also some libraries in lit to make the React integration a little bit better. Okay, so adoption. This is pretty useful. I don't know what happened at the beginning of 2024. I don't know what happened, but anyway, this is the percentage of sites that actually have web components on them. This is not based on search query data or anything, right? So if you look in the upper right-hand corner, we're looking at roughly 20% of all sites on the web have some sort of web component on them. Whether or not you realize it or whether it's used by, often it's like a web framework like React or Angular or whatever that's using a library that uses web components inside of it, right? So anyone ever used Ionic before? Oh, only a couple of you, huh? All right, web components in Ionic. That's basically what they use, so. All right, so let's look at a very, very simple example here. So there's my simple web component demo, right? That's very exciting. Oh, I need to make it even bigger. There. All right, simple web component demo. All right, and I will run over here, and I guess I should have made this. Can you guys see this in the back? Nah, not really. It sounds like a not really to me. All right, so. All right, there we go. Is that better? Yes. All right. So, all right. So I will go over here, and actually I'll go over here. All right. So the first thing you'll see is the web page. This is that page that we were just looking at, right? Very exciting, right? You notice it imports one script, which is one component, and then there's a little element there, my web component, and it has two properties, foo and bar. And this is what the code looks like, okay? So it is a class, and it extends HTML element. So wow, we're extending an element. That's pretty cool, right? And we can specify some attributes called observed attributes. These are ones we want to actually look at because you get a whole bunch of attributes out of the box with an element, right? We have constructor, and inside of it we are creating a shadow root, right? So we're creating that shadow DOM. This is the root element of the shadow DOM, and then we're just creating some elements. I put it in a div. I'm calling a render method, and all the render method does is add inner HTML to my div. Very exciting. And then I'm appending it to the shadow root. So I'm basically building the internal DOM of my element, right? And these methods down here are just callbacks that I can use if I want to, right? So I can say I get a callback when it's connected, disconnected, etc. I also get a callback when the attributes change. So if the attribute changed, I can listen to that, do some stuff. So when that happens, I update my internal state and then I render. And there I am good to go. There's one part missing. Oh yeah. Yeah, there usually should be a custom elements.define down here, which looks like it got eaten somewhere. So I didn't have to basically register it with the, but basically tell the page that this is a new web component. All right, so I'll go back here. So this is that same thing, right? And we will go to the element inspector, which is still dark. I apologize. Okay. And you'll see here's my web component, right? And what's nice about this is, I wrote that JavaScript, and I can actually do stuff like this, which is, of course, very convoluted here. So I'll go over here. And so I can say, all right, so now I have my web component, right? And this is actually my component, and I can do el.foo equals front runners. Right, that's very exciting. Nothing really changed there, right? So, but I could do this. So what if I did el Oh, okay, then it changed, right? So looks like I changed the property, nothing happened, but the attribute changed, right? And if my component had other APIs, I could call this directly, right? I could do something like this. All right, so if I said, all right, so then I say body dot, okay, and you see there's that callback there. It says my web component was removed from the page, right? So that's one of the callbacks that's there. So also if I re-added it, it would say the same thing again, right? So I've got a very simple web component, not too exciting, but I wrote some code. It actually works in the browser just like any other element, right? And that's sort of the way it works. Now, if I want to use a library like lit, it just makes all this stuff a little bit easier, right? So this is what we saw before, right? And if I were to write this in lit, it would look like this. So lit makes heavy use of decorators. JavaScript is now finally supporting decorators natively, if you didn't know. But lit works with the experimental decorators in Babel or TypeScript, as well as the new ones. And I'm a TypeScript fan, so this is TypeScript. But this is, actually, I'm sorry, this is the JS version, not the TypeScript version. But the first thing you see is that there's this property decorator. So the property decorator basically makes it easy to declare properties without doing that static array, right? And it lets me do things like ensure that if I change an attribute, it also changes the property. So it gives me attribute and property synchronization, which is handy, okay? I have a render method which is required. And here I render, and it has this handy thing here, this HTML thing. So this is a template tag literal, which is another pure JavaScript feature. There's no magic compiler. This just regular JavaScript, but the tag template literal method or function here actually knows how to handle this, right? So these are reactive properties that are in here. Then I can use all the same callbacks if I want to. And there are, of course, other callbacks in lit in general. So this is the JavaScript version. And the only difference is that this one, if I change a property and an attribute, they'll sync. That's really the only difference in the behavior of this one. So if I went to this, went back here, go here, it's the same sort of idea. And if I did this, and I did el dot prop1 equals hello. Oh, this, I guess the name of this one is a little bit different. There's some added stuff here from some plugins that I have. My lit element, all right. All right, now if I do that, there it changes. So now it's reactive, right? So I can set the attribute or I can set the property, right? So that's really the only difference between those two different versions. And the TypeScript version, actually that was a TypeScript version. The JavaScript version looks like this, my bad. Although I think you can use the decorators in the TypeScript version with Babel if you want to. This is the pure JavaScript version. It has this properties. And the difference here is that you specify the types here as opposed to just the name is like you do with a regular web component. But the rest of it's pretty similar. So that's a very, very simple example. So let's look at a couple other things. All right, so if we talk about lit in general, so that was just very simple, web components and a couple lit examples, right? So I didn't say too much about lit. So lit is a simple library that just helps writing web components. So you saw very quickly that just with a couple different decorators and things, it just made that whole process a little bit less boilerplate, okay? But it's not a framework. It doesn't do a lot of stuff. It just gives you some extra sugar and a few extra features that make it easy to write web components, okay? Has anyone heard of the Polymer project before? Was around in Google? So a few of you, okay. So Polymer was sort of the first foray of Google into web components. And it was basically, it was a framework for writing web components, but also had a lot of frameworky features in it. And it was around for a while. I wrote a lot of Polymer code. And unfortunately, Google killed it, which they do. But there is a good reason, because I think it becomes sort of overly complicated. And they basically internally had written lit. They had lit element, lit HTML, and I'm like, hey, this is much more lightweight and encompasses a lot of the stuff we really care about. So lit is basically the successor to Polymer. Okay, but here's a fun fact. If you go to the desktop version of YouTube and you just do a quick little look at the elements, oh look, it's a web component. So YouTube, the desktop version, I'm not sure about the web version, is written using Polymer and web components. And they have not updated it as far as I can tell. Because Polymer had something called just Shady DOM, which is sort of like their own sort of thing before Shadow DOM, and that is supported, that's currently in the YouTube site, so I think they're still using Polymer. All right, so lit gives you, on top of web component spec, it gives you the templating, which is the HTML template tag literal, right? And again, this is just pure JavaScript or TypeScript, whatever you want to use. It gives you directives, which are a way to extend the way the templates work. And it also has, lit also has reactive properties. And that's sort of the main thing, that support for integrating attributes and properties. And you can decide when you write a property if you want it to be reflected as an attribute or not, okay? And you can also get notified when values change. And you can also use the state decorator if you have something which you want lit to care about, but is internal state, but not an external property, okay? And it adds some more lifecycle hooks. So the web components lifecycle is pretty straightforward. So there's some different, like any sort of framework that works with, or library that works with components, there's different hooks you can hook into, like before update, will update, et cetera, et cetera. And you can get notified when after update. this mind map tool I use was great, and then they came out with a new version of their editor, which is not great. So I'm like, man. And they deprecated the old one, so I can't use it anymore for my presentations. So anyway, so there's a more complicated lifecycle going on here, which is nice. They also have some other sort of ancillary features. They have reactive controllers, which allow you to sort of hook into the lifecycle of a component and then do different things, like talk to a backend service or whatever. There is a context, which is similar to the React context, just a place to put some data that you want to expose to children in the component tree. Okay. There's asynchronous tasks, which let you basically integrate the reactive updates with a backend request or process. You can do mix-ins if you want to have sort of a multiple inheritance sort of thing. And Lit Labs has lots of great little extra utilities like integration with signals and all sorts of other things. There's lots of different companies that use web components. They're very popular for companies and organizations that have design systems that they want to provide components for, okay? So you'll find like Red Hat, Adobe, SAP, ING, they have these design systems, they have web components to implement them, and then those web components can work with different frameworks. Another good example is the Lightning web components from Salesforce. Those are web components as well. So those are some other things. So I'm almost out of time. So what I'm going to do is just look at a couple more examples because those are the most interesting things. This little project I have here, this is on GitHub. It's called Virtua GitHub repo list. A big mouthful. But the project structure is very straightforward. You notice I don't have a lot of dependencies here. I have lit, and then I have TypeScript, and then I have this web development server, which it could be any development server. This one is really good at working with ES modules and doesn't do a lot of fancy stuff, but it does integrate with Rollup. And you can get that from open web components. We'll look at an example. So I think since we're low on time, I'm going to pick a more complicated one. So we will look at this one. We've seen a very simple example. I'm going to pick the more complicated one. Okay, and again, if you go to the GitHub repo, you can grab all this yourself. So I'm going to pick this one. And you'll see my lovely CSS skills. Actually, my CSS skills are better. My design skills, not so much. All right, so this is a lovely component that will find web components repositories on GitHub, right? So, and it can filter by different topics. So if I want to pick lit, oh, right, the internet. I'm going to connect to my hotspot because I didn't talk enough to find out what. All right. So I'll try this again. Okay, there we go. All right, so it went and it found all these little component libraries. I mean, all these little repos, right, that have the word lit in them, and then I can change it if I just want to see which ones have stencil. Stencil is a library from Ionic that will generate web components. It has slightly different syntax, but it basically compiles the web components. I can look for things with web components and things with lit. Exciting, right? So then I see all my things, and then if I want, I can even click on them and then go to where the framework is, right? All right. So very exciting. So the way this code looks is like this. So the HTML, I will zoom in again. Looks like this. Okay, so I've got two modules. One is which is the GitHub repo list, which is the main component, and then there's a filter. Okay, I'm using CSS properties, another standard, which is now finally getting a lot of traction. It's been around for a while though. So basically saying for my component, these are the properties I want for the CSS to render it. Okay, and then inside down here, I have my component, and then inside of it I have a header, and then I have another component called the Virtua repo list filter, where I can put in different topics. Okay, so this is what we have. Now the repo list is pretty straightforward. We have this custom element decorator to basically register it with the component registry for the page. Okay. I can return styles programmatically if I want to. And lit has this handy little CSS tag template literal. Again, this is all pure JavaScript. And so this is defined in a different module. And then I can throw in some additional CSS here. Okay. You notice this slotted header thing. So web components support these things called slots, which are, again, something that you see in some frameworks like Vue, right? Where you basically can say, okay, here's my content, and then the web component can then use the content internally, right? So inside of the HTML, you saw that we had this stuff inside. This is going to be a slot, okay? So this lets me style that slot, and you see I'm styling the header inside of the slot. And then we have a property, we have the URL, so we're going to the GitHub API. There's a query string, and there's some callbacks. There's some model objects, different model interfaces, I should say. This is the rendering here, so I'm rendering a section. And there's some conditional stuff here. There's an error. I can render a card. I can render the header. And again, this is all just programmatically, right? So it's all pure JavaScript. There's no special compiler dealing with HTML templates or anything. And I can structure things like this, okay? And then inside of the HTML, I can still use other components, right? So there's actually another component that does the card, right? And then there's also the method which does the fetch, and then this is the one that does the filtering. And you notice what the filter does is it's listening for an event, okay? So what happens is inside of this filter here, the top, this other component, if someone does something, if they click on one of those checkboxes, this actually fires an event. Now, this is not some special event. This is actually just a normal DOM event, right? So the GitHub repo list actually will listen for this event, which right here. It has an event listener. So pure JavaScript, nothing fancy going on. And we actually use DOM events for communication, right? So what happens is the filter component sends an event, the repo list listens for it, and then updates accordingly. Okay. So that's actually what's going on here. And you can imagine I can do all sorts of cool stuff. Like I could edit this programmatically. And what I love about web components is, let's say I'm wondering about this, or I want to work with it. See, there's the shadow root there, right? So this is actually all visible to me. Okay. There's the URL, right? And I can actually go in here and change this to topic, food, okay? All right, now that created all this, right? And then I could even go here and change this. Let's say I wanted to, let's say I'm really into different types of food. I could say, chocolate and fried chicken. I don't know why that's what came up, but whatever. All right, so now I have this, right? And then I could also do that programmatically, right? And I can also access the element in the DOM. So what I love about this is that I can go there and I can actually find out what's going on. I don't need a special inspector to tell me what the component tree is like. I don't have to do all this stuff to figure out where my application is. It's all right there. It's in the browser. So that's actually what we get with lit. And of course, there's more I could talk about. There's one more thing I want to point out, and that is the CSS shadow DOM thing here. So if I go back here, and I go to my first example, okay, so this is a really boring one. This just lists out each repository without any more details. But you notice down here I have this undocumented card class, right? So in this particular page, I have a style, which is card, right? And that is this down here. But inside of the actual component, which is in here, the shadow root, this section class is card as well, okay? And so because of shadow DOM, the card class, which is global, doesn't affect this, okay? And that's the kind of encapsulation that shadow DOM gives you. And that's why if you want to style this part, you need to expose properties, CSS properties to the caller to do some customization, okay? All right, so that's sort of my whirlwind tour. So I'd say, you know, from my perspective, I love working with lit and web components because it's pure metal, it's to the browser, it's really fast. Lit is a really lightweight library, okay? It's really great for building out design systems or reusable components that people can use in different frameworks. But we actually, when I build projects internally, we actually just use lit by itself. We don't use any frameworks, which is nice. Now, I will say I do Angular, React, and Vue for clients a lot, so, but that's basically the deal. If you want to learn more, you can go to Custom Components Everywhere to find out all the different frameworks and how they work with lit. OpenWC, Open Web Components, is a good place too for just web components in general. Lit.dev is the main lit website, which is really well done. And for additional resources, there is an awesome lit list. Stencil is another good choice. And there's a couple articles here about the state of web components from a couple years ago. I didn't find a really recent one. But those are additional places you can look. And again, this presentation is at kitomann.com. I need to update the link, but I'll do that today. That's pretty much it. I think we're out of time. So you can find me in these places. I am not on Twitter, but I'm on Blue Sky and LinkedIn and Mastodon. So, all right, thank you.